What if you stopped trying to be the version of you that makes everyone else comfy, but leaves you feeling kind of miserable? You're always going to be too much for some, not enough for others. So instead, why not be exactly what the fuck you need? This is Too Much, Not Enough, the podcast where we stop shrinking, start trusting, and reclaim every single messy, magical part of who we are. I'm Hannah, your host, and on today's episode, the fuck is gonna happen next? Like, I'm 33. I'm gonna have to move back in with my parents. I just burned down my life, essentially. Like, what the fuck? I knew probably within the first 3 months that it was not the right match. There were nights where my mom had to sleep with me because I was so panicked. I had given him every ounce of me, and I was in the darkest moment of my entire life. And the man who I was talking about spending the rest of my life with could not be there. You are going to not only make it out the other side, but there is thriving waiting for you in your future. Okay, Hannah Bonans. The train has left the station. This is happening. Go for it. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness gracious. We're doing it. We're doing it. It's episode 1. I've taken the leap and I'm free falling. There's no going back. I'm just so glad you're here with me. And honestly, it feels so damn good. Like, really good to be here. This has been a long time coming. So welcome. Grab your favorite drink, maybe cozy up in a chair or in bed, or maybe it's a great time to go on a reset walk because we're about to have a little chat, cutie. Not only am I so excited for today's episode, but this entire season, it is going to be a soul-shaking deep dive into reclaiming ourselves. And we're doing it together, which is the best part. All those little bits that we learn to tamp down because someone or something somewhere along the way messed with our heads and sparked this story that we're too much of this, not enough of that. I'm Hannah. I was formerly an event producer for 15 years, and now I'm a speaker, somatic guide, and self-mastery coach. I love studying human behavior and the human body. It is truly one of my hyperfixations, and it kind of has been for most of my life, definitely since I was a teenager reading Chicken Soup for the Soul. If anyone gets that reference, hopefully you do. I love using science to explain mysticism, and connecting with my body's wisdom has really and truly transformed my life in a big, big way. It has been a wild journey for me, but once everything started clicking, it was like a big fucking exhale. I am actually bursting to share stories and conversations with you so that together we can remember who the fuck we came to this earth to be. Because the world needs that magic. So, as a kid, my theme was too much. The ones I remember most are too sensitive, too dramatic, too emotional. And as a triple water sign, that makes a lot of sense. But underneath it all was like this deeper story, one I couldn't really name at the time, but have since understood better. I had this nagging sense that I was deeply unlikable. And then in my late teens and early adulthood, that narrative flipped from being too much to not enough. I was not lovable enough, not productive enough, not fast enough, not successful enough, constantly feeling behind and trying to catch up. And like everyone else around me had like figured out this life thing. And I was really, really struggling. And that constant tug of war between the too much and not enough followed me for years, decades, really, until my early 30s, when my body finally said, no more. And what came next was a pretty gnarly breakdown, then a wake-up call, and then the beginning of everything I never knew I was searching for. I well and truly went from barely surviving to now where I truly, and I know it sounds a bit cheesy and cringy, I am truly thriving, like in a way that I never thought was possible for me. Because, you know, I've experienced anxiety and depression in different forms for most of my life. Like I can distinctly remember being such an anxious kid, such a nervous Nelly, worrying all the time. And that little Hannah didn't know how to process those feelings through her body. All these big emotions and big feelings about the world and the people around her were constantly flooding in, and I didn't know where to put them. And so they vibrated in my being as anxiety. And then, you know, every once in a while that anxiety, my system would just be so exhausted from that anxiety. Then these like majorly low mood swings would come through where I'd feel so apathetic and just like disconnected from the world, disconnected from any sort of excitement about the future. And me at my core is someone who absolutely loves life, and not in this like I'm always happy and nothing ever bothers me way, but just in this like I have such a thirst for life and experiencing the whole spectrum of it. But prior to understanding properly how to process all of that, I felt everything in such an extreme way and held it in my body that like it just was not healthy at all. All right. So it probably makes most sense to start with my breakdown because it was a very intense and very, very dark time for me. And honestly, while I was going through it, I truly didn't know if I was going to come out the other side. And like I said, not only did I survive it, but I am now thriving. I am in such a better place than I was pre-breakdown. So I'm going to take you back to 2021, just before the moment everything changed. I was living outside of the city with my ex. And like most of us, I was doing my very best to reconcile what the fuck just happened in the world. I was also starting to get kind of serious about my health and my healing journey because the pandemic, like most of us, kind of gave me a taste of what slowing down was like. And I realized I really liked it. So I was exercising. In fact, I did the 75 hard challenge. And as a girly who has always struggled with any sort of exercise routine or sticking to it, really thinking I was just never someone who would, you know, exercise as part of my daily habits. Completing 75 hard was like a huge win for me. I was seeing a talk therapist every other week. I'd stopped drinking. I truly thought that I was doing all the things I needed to be doing in order to be living my best life. But in addition to the anxiety and depression that I was going through, which was at an all-time high, like I was honestly anxious every day, every single day, in quite a extreme way. And I was going through monthly or more bouts of depression. I was so fearful of things, like all these things that maybe previously I wasn't super comfortable with. Like, for example, I've always had a fear of spiders, but, generally been able to deal with it. But at the time, my backyard was like quite jungly, like and overgrown, and there were tons of spiders out there, and I just wouldn't go into the backyard. Like, I was terrified of all these spiders. And flying was another thing. I've flown since I was a kid. I was born in Europe. My parents are from England. We moved around a lot. And then once we moved to Canada, we were flying home to visit family in England all the time. And, I wouldn't say I've ever been like the most relaxed traveler, definitely nervous, but I was able to travel, was traveling a lot on my own. And all of a sudden, like the thought of getting on an airplane was insurmountable. And it was impacting my life. Like I wasn't going and doing things and seeing friends and such because of that. And so that was becoming a little, at the time I wasn't seeing it for what it was, but looking back, I'm like, yeah, that wasn't normal at all. I was also having a lot of pretty extreme digestive issues. Now, I am someone who does not have the most well-oiled digestive system. I deal with constipation a lot, especially when I'm stressed. Like I can tell when my body is in a stress state now that I'm much more in touch with it, because all of a sudden there's quite a change in my bowel movements. Sorry if that's TMI, but I was having severe digestive issues. I remember I had to stop eating apples at the time because I would take one single bite of an apple and I actually would feel so full that it's like I wanted to crack my chest bone open to like relieve the pressure. It was so deeply uncomfortable. I was losing my hair, like significant chunks of my hair, which at the time I chalked up to maybe like a leftover COVID symptom. My mom had dealt with some long COVID symptoms and she had lost a bunch of hair. So I was like, okay, maybe I got COVID. I didn't know it. And I'm losing my hair from that. But there were some of these signs there. But again, I was living so out of alignment with myself that it's not surprising that these things weren't registering as the alarm bells they should have been. Because what was happening really was my body was sending up signals that something was not right and that I needed to pay attention. And I kind of thought I was, but I was not paying attention to the thing I really needed to, which was to stop self-abandoning all the frickin' time. We'll get back to that. But what ended up happening was I was down in New York visiting some friends and I took an edible. Weed has never agreed with me. It has always made me anxious. When I've taken it, I've never understood the relaxing effects that other people describe, but I hadn't been drinking and, I wanted to have some fun with my friends and I decided, you know what, why not? Let's try an edible for the very first time. In hindsight, maybe not the best thing when I didn't have anything in my system and hadn't been used to anything like that. And I was in the state I was in, but hindsight is 2020. I didn't really see it at the time. And I took a tiny dose, like 2.5 milligrams. I had a shit trip, not surprisingly. I wanted it to be over right away. And then I went to bed. Thought really nothing of it. The next morning, got up, went shopping with my girlfriends. We had a lovely day. I came home that evening and we were getting ready to go out for dinner and I had my first panic attack. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I've had anxiety since I was a kid and I had thought that I had had a panic attack before. I now believe that what I had before were just like experiences of my system being so overloaded that I had a crazy kind of discharge from my nervous system, which felt like what I thought was a panic attack. But that night I 150% had my first real intense panic attack. It was like, it started in my chest, numbness spreading down my arms into my hands. I was disassociating, and the fear was unbelievable. I couldn't eat anything. And I know for some people, when they get really stressed or really anxious, that's a normal thing to happen. For me, that's never been the case. I always ate to numb the big feelings. Eating was a numbing mechanism for me. So not being able to eat, like being in such an intense state that I couldn't eat anything, was like wild, and definitely something for me to like pay attention to, which I did. And that kind of kicked off like 3 to 6 months of just absolute chaos for me. I got home and still didn't really know what was going on, but I was still really anxious, multiple panic attacks a day, and I was starting to disassociate in quite an extreme way. I got home to the place I shared with my ex, and I told him that I wasn't doing well. And it's funny, at the time he said, because my parents were out of town, and at the time he said something along the lines of like, well, your parents will be home soon and that'll be really great. And I remember kind of clocking it as being a bit funny, but I thought, yeah, like, I mean, I'm so lucky. I have a really close relationship with my parents, and they're really supportive and have always been very open about mental health. So I knew that I could talk to them, and, they know me so well and know that this is not normal, and they could kind of help me navigate it. And then basically the panic attacks just like kept coming. I was like so low, really, really depressed, really struggling to work. I had a big client project on at the time, and I remember just like it took every part of my being to get myself to that computer every day and try to concentrate. Like my ability to concentrate had gone out the window. And then I started experiencing what I now know to be depersonalization and derealization, which, if anyone out there listening has experienced this or is experiencing it, oh my God, buddy, my heart goes out to you. It is so tough. You are so unbelievably strong if this is something you're experiencing. Basically, it's this incredible protection mechanism that our mind has to keep us safe, where we disassociate in such an extreme way that I honestly was walking around like watching myself exist. I remember I was still producing events at the time, and I had to go on site and manage the load in and load out of this big trade show at the Metro Toronto Convention Center. I was walking around like talking to people and suppliers and exhibitors, and I remember distinctly like kind of watching myself and thinking, how the fuck are you doing this? Like, you're not even in your body. Like, how are you functioning? I would look at myself in the mirror and I would not be able to recognize the person I was looking at. Like, I was so disassociated that like I couldn't connect with my own being, my own reflection. And that's a really fucking scary thing. When your mind basically feels like a hostile environment and you want to unzip yourself and like step out of it, that's a really tough place to be, because you don't have a choice to do that. And so you have to be there and stick it out while you're absolutely drowning. I was drowning, quite honestly. And I'm extremely lucky because I had an unbelievable support system around me, all but one person, which I'll get back to. And I remember thinking at the time, like, my heart shattered for anyone who either has to go through that alone or feels like they have to go through that alone. It really, really is so heartbreaking to think about that. So I was at the beginning sort of trying to push through. I was like, okay, I got to get back to normal. This is hopefully just going to be short, figure it out with my doctor, and I got to get back on track. Very cute of me to think that at the time, because, really what had happened was I had pushed my body so far. I had become so misaligned in my life, in my relationship, in my work, that my body essentially like shut everything down so that I could not keep going on the path I was going. And I am forever grateful for the intelligence that my body had to send up such a loud alarm bell that I could not possibly ignore it. But it had been sending up alarm bells up until that point, and I had been ignoring them. I had been abandoning myself. I knew what I needed to do. It wasn't like I didn't know. It was the fear of doing what I needed to do stopped me. So I just basically pretended that everything was okay when it wasn't. And the biggest misalignment was my relationship, which at that point I had been in for 7 years. And quite frankly, I knew probably within the first 3 months that it was not the right match. Now, my ex is honestly such a genuinely beautiful person, but he was drowning under layers of just shit. Just shit from his childhood, shit that he was dealing with currently. Like, he had figured out how to function in a brain and body that needed so much help. And I knew that early on in our relationship. And as is or had been my MO up until that point, I became the therapist. I became the full support system. I became the caretaker of all the emotional needs in the relationship. I was the person who was filling my cup and filling his cup without much in return. And I really believed that that was my worth in a relationship. That with men, if I wasn't the fixer, if I wasn't taking care of their emotional needs, if I wasn't available to be the emotional punching bag, that I didn't really have a purpose, which I have come to learn is absolutely not the case, but was, part of the reason why I had gotten myself to where I had gotten to. And it's clear to me now, but back then I was so hopeful that we together would be able to dig him out of the hole that he was in mentally and emotionally. But if someone will not face their own emotions, then you can guarantee they're going to neglect yours. And that is something that I am glad that I understand very clearly now, but I didn't then. I hoped I could change him. I hoped I could save him. And honestly, I got some worth from that, I'm sure, but saving him became a full-time job, which meant abandoning myself and my needs. And honestly, in the relationship, I did stand up for myself. I did say what I needed, but each time he repeatedly showed me that he couldn't meet that, I then swept that under the rug and kept going. I became very good at being deeply disappointed and pretending it didn't matter, pretending like my needs and what I wanted out of a relationship didn't matter, to the point where I basically just assimilated into him, that my whole being became directed at keeping him in a decent enough state that we could kind of keep going. What that meant was I became so disconnected from myself that I truly didn't even know what brought me joy anymore. It's crazy to think now, but I didn't even see how far I had gotten from myself until afterwards, until even friends were like, yeah, it was not good. But when you're in it, it's hard to see. And when you love someone, it's hard to make the choices are right, even though they are going to be so painful for everyone involved. And so this breakdown was a huge, huge wake-up call for me, because my body basically took over and said, if you keep heading down the road you're heading down, you are not going to make it out. So it created such an extreme situation for me that like I had to stop my life and take stock. And I had to pay attention to every little thing that was making how I was feeling at the time even worse, because I knew I wouldn't survive, another 6 months feeling like this. My nervous system was so jacked up. It was so locked in this like fight, flight, freeze, collapse sort of cycle, not coming back to the baseline of rest and digest, that I had moved in with my parents because I was still with my ex at the time, and he was working, and my parents were retired, and they were around every day, and like they could kind of take care of me. In retrospect, I realized that's exactly what my ex wanted, because he just didn't know how to support me. But I was living with my parents. There were nights where my mom had to sleep with me because I was so panicked, like waking up in the middle of the night and being alone with my thoughts was just not an option. I was so overstimulated. I couldn't take in any external stimuli. I couldn't watch TV. I couldn't listen to music. And music is a place I usually go to like unwind, relax, reset. I could not listen to music. I couldn't leave the house. I was barely hanging on with work. Very noticeably, my partner did not show up for me. He was not there. He did everything he could to stay away and let my parents take over, sort of going back to what I said earlier about him being like, well, your parents will be home in a few days, so like, well, it'll be fine. He needed them to step in because he just couldn't. And I have gone through this so many times in my head. I truly don't blame him, because he was just not equipped. He was struggling himself enough that he couldn't possibly show up for me in the way I needed. But what was absolutely heartbreaking was that I had poured into this man for 7 years. I couldn't fill my cup fast enough to pour it into his. Like, I had felt like I had given him every ounce of me, and I was in the darkest moment of my entire life. And the man who I was talking about spending the rest of my life with, who I was talking about having children with, could not be there for me. It just was such a like wake up call of like, wait, if this happens again and we have kids, and he can't show up, like that's not a life I want to live, especially as I was watching my parents, just even though they had no fucking clue what was going on either, and internally were probably panicking, they showed up for me in the most unbelievable way. Like, I would not be here today if it was not for them and my friends and my sister who just rallied around me. But my partner just couldn't show up. And I started realizing I can't pretend that I'm strong enough to carry the both of us, because I am really freaking strong. But in the moments that I'm not, I need someone. I need a partner who can swoop in and take over. And it's so crazy to think of now, but like I was staying at my parents' house during the week, and then on the weekends was like, okay, I need to like go home to see him. I could barely feed myself and bathe myself, but I was like, well, got to get home to see him, because he can't make it out here. So I'll go home to the place that just like my body rejected the minute I walked in. I hated the place that we lived, and it was part of what contributed to all of it. But I would go in and like the anxiety would spike, and then he would, basically dump all the stuff, because I was his entire support system at the time. And don't get me wrong, I had positioned myself as that. Like, it takes two people to create a situation. It was not entirely one-sided, but I was his entire support system. So he was basically dumping all of this shit on me, that he was struggling to handle, because his person, who normally is where he processes all these two big feelings through, wasn't around. And then I would come in and he would dump this on me, and I would just immediately like disassociate, and my body was physically rejecting him. Like, my fists would physically ball up when he would call, when I would talk to him. And because I needed to pay attention to all the things that were making the situation worse, because these needed to be cut out in order to heal, it became increasingly obvious that we just couldn't continue together. So New Year's Eve of 2021, we broke up. It was awful. And I remember coming back to my parents' place. My poor mom had plans with neighbors and was like, nope, I'm staying here. We're going to have dinner together. We had this dinner together at the island, just like both kind of like shell shocked, but also I think both knowing that this is exactly what needed to happen in order for me to be able to move forward and start truly healing. And I remember then going up on the rooftop of their house and watching the fireworks and thinking, what the fuck is going to happen next? Like, I'm 33. I'm going to have to move back in with my parents. I just burned down my life, essentially. Like, what the fuck? What do I do? What's going to happen? And so the next few months were like an intense, immersion into trying to get my body back to baseline, my mind back to baseline. I started doing cognitive behavioral therapy. I got on medication, and literally every waking moment was dedicated to nurturing my body and my mind, because I knew how serious it all was and that I had no other option. And in this journey and in doing cognitive behavioral therapy, I got connected to neuroscience and somatics. And so, as I'm reeling from what felt like this massive failure, honestly, up until that point, ending a long-term relationship was like the number one failure for me. Like, my parents have been together since they were 18. They are just this beautiful example. My grandparents on both sides were together from a very young age and stayed together until they passed away. And like, that was my, guiding light, that like, you get into a long-term relationship, you stay together, and like, what does it say about you if you can't make it work? And also, to an extent, like, I didn't have a great example. It's like, I knew in my body what was out there for me and what I deserved and what I truly wanted in a relationship. But it was my first real long-term relationship. So I was like, maybe that's just like a pipe dream. Maybe what I want and what I see in the movies and what people write songs about just isn't reality. Or maybe it's not reality for me in the way I work. And so I just made so many excuses. And because I had put this like ending a long-term relationship in the category of the utmost largest failure that I could have, it stopped me from making the decision that I needed to make way earlier. And then once I finally did make the decision, I realized that it was not the failure that I had built it up to be in my mind at all. In fact, it was one of the smartest decisions I ever made for myself. As I focused on all this sort of like getting myself back on track, like I said, I got really engaged with somatics and neuroscience, specifically nervous system regulation, which is something I was in desperate need of. I started studying the polyvagal theory of our nervous system, really diving into somatic exercises, building somatic awareness. I had been so disconnected from my body that like, I didn't even know how to respond to the signals it was sending me. Like, I remember a coach at the time telling me, like, when you have to go to the bathroom, do you go like as soon as you realize, or do you ignore that need? And I'm like, sometimes I don't even feel it until it's like so intense. But yeah, I ignore that need because everything else is more important. My to-do list is more important, so on and so forth. She's like, no, I want you to start there. Go to the bathroom when your body tells you it needs to go to the bathroom. It seemed so simple, but it was like that was how I started building back trust with my body, because that's essentially what I needed to do. I had ignored it and abandoned it for so long that I had to rebuild that relationship with it, build awareness, and then start responding, and then create so much attunement that I was able to catch misalignment before it got too far down the path. And it became really like a habit, and it is now such an embodied habit. I also learned and shifted my understanding of anxiety and depression from what I thought was just like the way I'm built and the way my mind's built, to understanding them as alarms that need to be paid attention to, not things to suffer and push through. So now I'm very lucky. I'm off medication and I barely experience anxiety anymore. It's wild to say, from going from like daily anxiety to barely experiencing it. Every time it started coming up as I was going through my journey of healing and getting back on track, I saw it as like, okay, this is here to tell me something. I need to tune in and figure out where I might be misaligned, where I might be pushing too hard, where I might be self-abandoning, where I might be saying yes when I really mean no, or hiding parts of myself that desperately need to get out. And as I did that, as I started relating my anxiety and depression to, an alarm system, essentially, everything started changing. I really got into breath work and contrast therapy, which is sauna and cold plunge. These things work so well for my body and help me like cycle through stuck energy, which is absolutely something I need. I know they're not for everyone, and I'm such a big believer of test out what works for your body. Try it out and see, because different things work for different bodies and in different seasons. Just because I'm here saying breath work was and is one of my number one tools does not mean that if it doesn't work for you, you're somehow broken. Our systems are all a little bit different, and what we need at different times in our life are also different. So testing, I really started testing out so many different things to help with that mind-body connection and that ability to drop into my body and connect with the wisdom that is innately there. Because the other biggest thing is that I had disconnected from my intuition. I am a highly, highly, highly intuitive person, and I had created a belief that I didn't know what I was talking about, that like inner knowing, that gut feeling was wrong, and that other people outside of me knew better than I knew inside of me. So reconnecting with that intuition and believing it and strengthening it, like turning the volume up on it, huge. I had a pretty major spiritual awakening through somatic channeling, which is a channeled form of energy work that I do, which we'll definitely dive into deeper later on in this season. And that led to learning how to release control, build self-trust, and surrender to life in a way that, wow, I never thought my mind previously would have let that happen. But as I created that connection with my body, that ability to surrender to life has been everything I've needed. Because see, we think that we can control what happens in life and keep ourselves safe. And I've just come to learn that's not true, and that surrender is not a sign of weakness or even giving up. It is a sign of the deepest level of trust with yourself and with the universe, that it has got your back, that you don't need to have that like insane grip of control, which I had all my life leading up until this point. I also was introduced to human design and learned that I am a projector who needs rest, which was a whole mind fuck when that happened, because I couldn't even read my human design like summary when I first received it, because I had been living so out of alignment with it. The do of my past, the control, the constant like existing in 100% masculine energy and not tapping into my feminine energy, being an event producer, all of that. My whole life revolved around doing, producing, and being more and not resting, and rest being a sign of weakness. And that is completely out of alignment with my design. And once I learned how to embrace rest and not feel so guilty about it, that was a 180 flip in my life. Like the energy that I could tap into when I let my body rest and my mind rest has opened up my creative centers in such a phenomenal way. I also got diagnosed with ADHD at 34, which answered a lot about, the overstimulation, the dysregulation, just so many things became clear once I got that diagnosis. And what's so awesome about this season is we're going to dive into each of these things in its own episode. So if that's something that you're interested in hearing more about, learning more about how it changed the game for me and how it could potentially do that for you, how it helped me come home to my real self and start presenting my authentic self to the world, which has had so many beautiful outcomes, then definitely follow along, because we will be diving into each of these topics with, some experts, and very exciting. Basically, this breakdown, wake up call, breakthrough really was exactly what needed to happen for me. It was fucking hard. It was brutal and painful. So painful, but it led me to a place that gave clarity to the things I always knew, but didn't have language or something to anchor to. So it wasn't like all these things that I, discovered were brand new and I became a brand new person. No, they were all pathways to remembering who I always was, the person that was always there, but that I was ignoring, to survive, to be accepted, to feel loved, to be in a relationship and not feel that painful sting of rejection when you bring your whole self that you don't even accept. The amount of self-loathing and self-hatred that I had previously, I'm not surprised I hid all those parts of me, all those beautiful, wonderful, messy parts of me, because I hated them. I thought they were bad. And in coming back to myself, I've healed so much of that. I've sat with those more shadowy parts of myself. I've communed with them. I've loved on them. And that's not easy. It takes patience and a lot of self-compassion, which can be really hard to find sometimes. But I now love a lot of those parts of me that I previously was so ashamed of. And it's really brought me to this place of embodying self-mastery, not for control, which is sort of what I was doing before, but as a devotion to my truest self, to the magic that I have that is unique to me, that I want to offer to the world, because I know that for someone else, they need that magic, because I was there. I needed the support, love, and magic of others. I needed to hear the stories of others, especially in the deepest, darkest part of it. I remember searching, literally Googling people who have gone through what I've gone through and made it out the other side, because I needed to cling on to the belief that I was going to be okay. So if you are listening to this right now and you are struggling, please let this story be that story for you, that you are going to not only make it out the other side, but there is thriving waiting for you in your future. There is joy and love and peace and groundedness like you have always craved but never knew was possible for you. I am living proof that it is possible. So please keep going. Okay. So that's the story of what brought me to where I am now. And let me tell you, my relationships are stronger than they have ever been. I found my person, the love of my life, the thing that I knew was out there. And at 33, when I ended a 7-year relationship, prayed on my knees would come into my life one day. And it has. And it's honestly better than I ever thought it would be. We have so much fun together. And I finally understand the embodied feeling of wanting to build a future with someone, because previously I just sort of understood it as a concept and something that you should do. But I want to build a life with this man. I want to grow old with him. I want to have babies with him. I want to go through the shit with him because he's just amazing. And if I didn't go through what I went through and commit to becoming the version of myself that would be able to be in a relationship like that, then he wouldn't have come into my life. I know it, because the old version of Hannah, while she was incredibly worthy, had a lot to remember in order to be in a thriving relationship. And so hopefully this conversation, this story time, is a reminder that you don't have to become anything to be enough. You already are. Perhaps, though, like me, you just need to remember that so that you can unapologetically reconnect with your enoughness that has always been there and come home to the real you to unlock this magical life that's waiting for you. I can't wait to see you in the next episode. And on that note, have I got a banger of a season coming up? We're going to be talking about late diagnosed ADHD, unmasking, human design, spiritual awakenings, somatic channeling, shitty relationships, finding your person, what it takes to go all in on your outrageous dreams, those ones that you don't even dare speak out loud because they are so wild that you don't want anyone to hear how outrageous they are. Yeah, those ones. We're going to talk about how you reach those dreams and then dream beyond them. We're going to talk a lot about self-trust, self-acceptance, self-compassion. And it's all going to be pretty no bullshit because that's how I operate. I'm deeply grateful for you coming along for the ride today as we remember how to be exactly what the fuck we need, and knowing that we were designed exactly right to bring maximum magic to this world, because I so deeply believe that the more you are, not only the better you will feel, but the better those around you will feel. Because honestly, the parts of you that you're hiding, people around you are probably expecting from you. They probably want you to be more of the too much or not enoughness that you keep telling yourself, because that is more authentic, more natural. It gives other people permission to be the things that they have been hiding. And as we unhide and remember together, that's where things are truly going to shift. So, if you like this episode or you have any questions or topics that you'd really like me to cover or dive deeper into, send me a DM on Instagram or TikTok. It's at Soma with ease. I want to hear all about what bullshit story you believed for far too long. How you were too much, not enough, or both. I'll see you next time.